Welcome all the viewers out there to the Arraya Solutions Vodcast. As in previous topics, we've assembled a group of leading experts in their field for this discussion, and our topic today is titled Tales from the CryptoLocker. Today's panel consists of a group of my peers at Arraya, all of whom are focused on or work within the cybersecurity realm. As a reminder, I'm Chuck Kiessling, the Senior Director of Infrastructure Presales at Arraya and a part-time lion tamer. Back in the studio, we have Scott Brion, the director of our cybersecurity practice, and from his team, we are welcoming first-timers Michael Piekarski, who is an enterprise security architect, and Keith Wood, who is a cybersecurity consultant and spends quite a bit of time with our customers. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to kind of jump in with you guys today, right? We're focusing a lot on CryptoLocker and ransomware in this conversation. So for those people that maybe really understand like a light definition or don't really have a full understanding of what ransomware and specifically CryptoLocker does, one of you want to kind of just do an overview of the CryptoLocker ransomware?
Sure. So, CryptoLocker ransomware started. We saw it hit the security landscape about 4 years ago, and really then it was a matter of encrypting people's files and requiring them to pay a ransom to get the key to unencrypt their files. It was pretty rudimentary attack. It took advantage of different vulnerabilities in systems a lot of times, mostly coming in through phishing. But it really didn't expand past the machine that was being targeted, where the click happened or the download happened. And then in 2017, everything changed when Eternal Blue vulnerability was discovered in the Microsoft Windows 7 operating system, which allowed for really the proliferation of malware in general across enterprise networks, but really allowed for the crypto function of the threat to be operationalized and really spread quickly. From there, it's now really evolved into becoming more of an extortion enterprise than simply just a ransom enterprise. The organizations that are doing this now are not only are they encrypting the data, but they are siphoning it off onto their servers so they can continue the threat or expand the threat. So, a lot of ways organizations were tackling the ransomware threat in the past was good backups, and they would not pay the ransom and recover the systems from backup. I personally worked in a few organizations where we were hit by early variants of ransomware, and that was how we recovered. Right, you just recover from a backup. So to counteract that solution from the victims, the attackers have modified their approach and now threaten to leak sensitive data as part of the ransoming event. So one of the reasons why we saw in 2020 the payment of ransom go through the roof was because of that expanded threat of the threat around data leaking, which for a lot of organizations have direct financial impact, as well as regulatory and compliance and potential legal recourse. So organizations were very willing in 2020 to pay the ransom in order to keep their attack, their breach, their data leaks quiet. And the ransomware gangs were, in a lot of cases, living up to their word. They weren't leaking the data if the ransom was paid. They were generating a reputational score in the threat world. And when they would ransom a customer or a victim, part of their ransom pitch was, "You can trust us. If you pay, we have references that will confirm. If you pay us, we will not release the data, and we will give you a restored key." So that really, expanded that market, as you can imagine. And, we're talking about people operating these environments that live in countries where there isn't a legal way to make a dollar. The only way to make an American dollar is to steal it. So, they really look for different ways to do that. And that's why it's really increased.
Yeah.
So now, sorry, go ahead, Keith.
I just wanted to jump in there. Typically the encryption of the systems, the CryptoLocker piece of it is the last step in an attack that's been going on for a while. Typically they're in your systems for a while, collecting all of that data, dumping password hashes, your protected data, mapping out the networks, establishing a foothold. And then the last step is typically to encrypt the systems and execute the ransom piece of the attack.
So, I mean, I've heard both of you really use the term ransom quite a bit, right? And, obviously when I think of ransom, I think of that old Mel Gibson movie. But, but, in that situation, in today's modern age, I mean, like when they're ransoming, like what exactly are they ransoming for things like that?
You mean dollar amounts?
Yeah. Like how are people paying that ransom? How are they kind of getting paid?
Sure. I mean, Mike, maybe you want to take that one. You get into the cryptocurrency conversation and.
Yeah, I mean, the dollar amount's going to vary. It seems that the attackers tend to do their due diligence on researching the amount of available funds or the amount of annual revenue that a company generates, and they pick a percentage of that to be paid in cryptocurrency of your choice, typically Bitcoin. But the important thing is that it, like Scott said, is these kits. Seemingly, a lot of them are pre-built kits that someone kind of rents and rolls their own and starts a campaign to roll it out. They proliferate throughout the environment. So one machine could turn into all of your HR documents, all of your IP, anything that's on a file share. It'll continue to crawl and encrypt everything throughout the environment. So that's where we see huge logistics companies brought to their knees because everything that they needed is now encrypted, and it happens pretty rapidly when it's not detected. And even performing the restoration, if they were to try to forego paying this ransom, they're still, in a lot of cases, if they haven't tested their restoration process, or even if they had, the amount of data that can be encrypted as rapidly as it can take days
to decrypt.
To decrypt or to restore alternatively.
Another challenge there is how do you know which systems to restore first? Do you have a priority
Right.
for what systems are most important to bring back first for the organization to get back up and running?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things too about the actual event of the ransom interaction, right? The point in time when the organization knows that they're owned and they make contact with their new owners. Those new owners, meaning the attackers, right? They will negotiate. To Mike's point, right? And Key's point, they've spent some time in the environment. They didn't just pop it the night before. They've been there for a while, so they know who the players are at the organization. They know what their financial sequences are. They know how much, typically how much they're insured for, and what those insurance policies cover. And they will negotiate a ransom amount based on timelines and agreements to pay. So you can get, if the quicker you're willing to pay a ransom, the lower the lower price you can typically negotiate. And we just heard in the news yesterday, it was revealed that JBS the meat packing company in Canada, they paid $11 million to the attackers. That is not surprising to me. We know in this team of a lot of examples and stories of firsthand accounts with organizations that have paid seven figures and eight figures plus. So those numbers are real. What they're in that situation, right? For JBS, they were ransoming operations, right? They were ransoming the ability for that organization to continue functioning. And so, I think that's a good segue into where these recommendations have come out, right? From the White House and from in an open letter and in an executive order. The data is, if we continue to look at ransomware or CryptoLocker as a data problem, right? Meaning that our data is going to get encrypted or stolen. a data theft or encryption problem. That is not the problem here. The problem, this is the attack on our core functional systems. The data that it resides on those systems is obviously needed to operate them. So it's part of that. But the continuous, we live in a world today where if a business is offline, it's immediately losing revenue, typically, and it's also losing mind share and trust, employee faith, all types of things. This happens rapidly. So the cost of that it can be incalculable when you want to determine, okay, what is 5 days offline? Well, you can do that business math and figure out what 5 days offline looks like or costs you, right? But the abstracts there are really hard to quantify. So that's what the attackers really have at their advantage, right? They've known, they've been in there for a period of time, so they're prepared. They've picked the day and time when they are going to let you know that they own your environment. It's typically going to be in a week where you have accounts receivable coming in, or if you're a retail organization, it's going to be in a time frame when it's your busiest time frame, maybe Black Friday week or sometime in December, right? We've had manufacturing organizations that we've worked with be targeted specifically around their peak times, and that is really what has changed since ransomware started in the cyberspace. It kind of was like a gnat in the scheme of things. It would take systems down here and there, and now it's emerged to this massive threat.
Yeah, I mean that is frankly for me, and I can only imagine for some of the people that don't spend as much time with you as I do. That's a lot of information for me to process. So I guess let's try to generalize this, and I think it's going to go. I think I'm going to ask just from input from all three of you. If I'm a customer and I want to do everything I can, knowing that there is no guarantees in life, right? If I want to do everything that I can, what are, let's say, the top 5 recommendations that you would make for any customer that wants to do as much as they can to try to protect against something like this?
Well, I think first, number one in my book is empower your staff, right? You need to have in your staff, in your IT staff, and potentially and hopefully either that person's or people are tied into the business as well, or somebody specifically on the business side that has their eye on security and is working closely with the business to understand the risk that to the business, right? Because if we can't, it's impossible now to cover every system, every piece of data. So it's really important that organizations have someone as part of their organization that understands what we call where the crown jewels are, right? Everybody thinks in an organization that the system that they need to run their part of the business is the most important. But a lot of times, there's only a few systems that are really needed to generate and recover revenue. And having that real deep understanding from a cybersecurity professional is super is a key point, right, to being prepared.
So if I'm for that part of the answer, if I'm hearing you correctly, I mean, first and foremost, I feel like this kind of goes along the lines of developing like a proper BCDR plan, right? So I need to know what is most critical, make sure that I've tested those systems, make sure that I have that stuff in place, and know what I can sustain and what I can't. So that's kind of what I'm getting out of that. What are your thoughts on the topic, Keith?
So for me, from a compliance and governance perspective, it's really integrating information security into your risk management process and your business risk management process. Defining what your business's risk tolerance is to help inform your policy and procedure for your technical controls, your administrative controls, and the technologies that you're going to employ, because every organization is different from an information security perspective. Manufacturing is quite a bit different than healthcare and financial. So depending on your industry, your business specifically, you need to determine what your risk tolerance is and how you intend to protect your crown jewels.
Piekarski, what do you have?
Kind of an extension of both of those things, I feel like nothing exists until it's tested. So you can have all the policies and procedures you want. You can have all the backups that you want. But if you don't test what the policy is to respond to an event, what the turnaround time is for restoring those crown jewels. I mean, you need to know what they are, but if you're backing up and restoring from tape and that process takes you a month, what's the point of having backups? So that needs to be tested often. And I think the other part is now your backups are part of those crown jewels. If they encrypt all of your data and then they encrypt all of your backups, you're no better off than you were before. So when you're storing your backups, you have to make sure that those are stored securely as well.
And to elaborate on that too, a key point that is missed a lot, and I think is majorly important in today's sphere, is configurations. The configurations of the systems and the tools that operate your infrastructure. Virtual Center is a good example, right? Recovering Virtual Center after being, from a ransomware attack, for instance, it would be a challenge. It would be one of the first things that you want to bring up, right? So, but do you really need all the data from vCenter that's rolled up in your SQL database as part of the restore? What you need is all the folder structures and the permissions and those configurations. Those things can be saved and managed in a separate way, where recovering your infrastructure, your network devices, your hypervisors, and those core pieces, that can be as simple as running an Ansible script, right? If you're prepared for an automated deployment script, to not use nerd terms. It's not just the data is the point I want to make, right? It's everything in between.
So let me kind of position what might seem initially like a little bit of a strange question to some people, and a lot of it stems from the conversations that we've been having. But generally, I feel like when people think about cybersecurity, right, they're thinking about things like antivirus, anti-malware, maybe their data protection, things like ADFS to protect identities. But do you find that more of the, call it like cybersecurity preparation conversations, if you will, include conversations around backup and disaster recovery because of this we'll call it a new landscape, even though it's a few years old?
Want to take that one, Keith?
Yeah, I'll take
Keith's
that one.
shaking his head. Let's go to him.
Yeah, in my practice as advising organizations from an executive level, increasingly it's to Mike's point. Have you tested all of this stuff? Have you done a restore of your data and tested to ensure it's there? Have you done an incident response tabletop to ensure that your policy and your procedure actually work? Do you know how you're going to communicate not only in IT but throughout the business during an incident? Right, tabletops, they seem that they're usually it's a lot of like tabletop. It's we're all begrudgingly participating in this effort until you really get about 20 minutes in and you start to realize the value that it brings to your organization and actually running through the tabletop, because there are so many lessons learned running through various scenarios, whether it be a business interruption or a virus infection or a full out compromise, depending on the scenario you paint and work through. The lessons learned and the updates to your policies and procedure are invaluable, because without having gone through a real event, it's the closest thing you've got. And it really uncovers all the gaps and the things that you thought you knew, or you thought you understand, or you thought, we're all buttoned up. That's when all of this comes out. And during an incident is not when you want to discover major gaps in your process or your procedure. So yeah, it's almost top of the pile anymore that we're talking about disaster recovery, business continuity.
Yeah, the area too where it gets complicated is depending on the type of attack and what the ransom is, the type of organization you are, you could very well likely not have the luxury of using the systems that have been compromised. Until they have been evaluated, they might be confiscated by the FBI. They could have evidence. There's a whole bunch of pieces and parts there too. So I guess what I'm getting at there is it expands that backup conversation beyond just the old DR story, right? That IT adopted after September 11th. It's really changed to be more of a business continuity conversation that is supported with backups.
So I'm gonna circle back really quick to you used the phrase a couple of times, Keith, like a tabletop. Just in case there are organizations that are watching this that aren't doing that, what is the tabletop?
So a tabletop is basically an exercise of running through your incident response policy or your disaster recovery policy and procedures. We designate a date and a time, and the team members get on lately it's been, a Zoom or a Teams or a WebEx meeting, all virtual, but we present a scenario where, it's 8:00 in the morning and you get a call at the help desk that, this user is reporting that there's a message on their computer that it's been encrypted and that, we owe some ransom. And it starts from there. What would you do? Like, here's your incident, start running through it. Or, this database is corrupted and, the procurement system is offline. What do you do? So it's not just an IT problem anymore. It's a business continuity problem, even though it stems from typically technology.
Well, and to that point too, the other piece and part there that you learn in the tabletop is the roles that aren't assigned. Every organization should be, anybody watching this, if you take anything from this right now, go back to your organization and say, who is the person responsible for communicating with outside individuals if we are breached? You need that person flagged, and then you want to say, what would you say? Work with your organization to prepare a letter, a canned letter, maybe 2 or 3 versions of an announcement or of some type of notification, so you can get in front of it, right? You have that taken care of. It's a lot of the dirty secret, right, of this industry right now, to be fair, is there are significantly more breaches than are reported, than the news sees. And that's a triumph for those organizations that have stayed out of the news. And your goal should be keeping your organization out of the news no matter what happens to it. And one of the ways you can do that is be prepared with understanding what your legal options are, what legal counsels you have available to you, what your public relations and information officer capabilities are, and then preparing them to accept the information that you might have to tell them when you tell it to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you had mentioned the news and people that stayed out of the news. Years ago, I worked with one of the credit card companies, and meeting with, at the time, was a relatively new CIO, and he basically said, like, he understands that there needs to be increase in IT budget, and the directive that he gave his entire IT team, which at the time obviously included cybersecurity, was, you keep us out of the news by doing this right. And I feel like there should be a lot more of that. But I know that we're talking today heavily focused on, CryptoLocker and the ransomware and things like that. And sometimes it seems, because you're having a pointed conversation, it seems like that may be bigger than what it really is. So let me phrase this question: like, where does ransomware fit into the overall threat landscape, right? There's all kinds of things that are threats to organizations, and ransomware seems like it's kind of like one piece of the potential. So where does ransomware fit in?
So ransomware fits in as one of the elements in the overall threat landscape. It's like Keith alluded to earlier. It's used as attackers, right, to monetize access to an environment. And Mike, I might defer to you on this a little bit, talking about because you alluded to it earlier as well. The servicification of the malware market, of the attackers world, right? How we've the coders now that are on the dark side have broken out and built kits now that are for hire. Mike, you want to maybe expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the same tools that I would use on a pen test, and in some cases, even better tools are available for purchase, and you can kind of white label them as your own for your campaign, and go after whoever you want. And they are modular, but they may have a module for privilege escalation or a module for lateral movement throughout the environment. They might have a module to cover your tracks and delete logs, but all of them are now going to have a module for some sort of ransomware. And they're cheap and they're pretty easy to use. And they have better support than some of the products you might already buy from a vendor right now. You can open a ticket and get a pretty good response time where they will troubleshoot why you can't encrypt your target. It's kind of wild, the market that is behind it. But
they have LinkedIn profiles. There's job openings for hire.
But one of the things that's interesting, and as far as the evolution of the threat landscape, if you think back to like Occupy, right, when anonymous was denial of servicing, that was the go-to. We want to screw with the banks. We're going to do a bandwidth-based denial of service attack and take them offline. And so for 3 days, you couldn't access whatever it was, pick a bank, and they'd be down. And that was that whole anti-sec, the LulzSec movement. That was one of their main tactics, was taking people down with bandwidth-based attacks. Now the way that they take you down, it freezes and halts your company. It's not a bandwidth-based attack. It's not an ephemeral attack. It is inside your infrastructure, and it's it's the market is so flush with it that it's cheap. The supply is there.
And where a lot of times in most cases today, the people that are actually requesting the ransom, that have done the gang that has encrypted your environment and that is requesting ransom, is not the people that actually gained initial access to your environment. There are groups that specialize in gaining initial access, and they will take they're for hire. So if certain organizations are targeted for whatever reason, right, you can go to them and say, hey, I want to target XYZ company. When you have access, foothold in their environment, let me know and hand it over. So they'll get access to that environment. This gang says to another gang, hey, we have access to XYZ company. Here's what where the value is. Here's how you can get in. Here are the passwords. Here's the access information. Do what you want with it. That gang might decide to monetize other pieces and parts of that infrastructure or data from that organization before they then pass it over to another gang. And that gang specializes in ransomware because they have the infrastructure needed to accept anonymized payments and launder the money. But these other pieces these other parts in the chain, really, they're just they're managed services companies, just like Arraya, except they provide a different service.
Throughout this conversation, there's been a couple of things that have come up and just kind of generated some questions in my mind. So first and foremost, let me start with this one. Are there any specific industries that you feel like are kind of safe from this, or is this more or less an inevitable thing, or not necessarily a matter of if but when for all industries?
I think it's everything. There is no computer system connected to the internet that shouldn't consider this a major threat to their environment.
Okay, so let's say I am one of these organizations and I get hit, and now that's the first thing. What should be my first steps from that? Like, what are you seeing as something common?
You mean as far as what's your first step when you're ransomed?
I've been ransomed. I'm an organization. What should be my first steps as an organization?
Well, to give a snarky answer, and probably one that Keith would want to give, you reference your tested and proven incident response policy and go from there. But the more, and the interesting thing is, right, I've obviously been on the other side of those phone calls, right, from a panicked customer, or even, a friend at a company in a situation. And a lot of times they forget that they do have tools and they have made some plans, if not maybe complete plans. So the first thing to do is take a breath and think, okay, what resources do I have already at my disposal, instead of going and looking for immediate new ones and reaching out all over the place. Chances are, if you have a cyber insurance policy, that your cyber insurance company has a breach hotline. They a lot of times provide tools and services right within the policy. 90% of the policies, the modern policies, have the 1-800 numbers right there in the clauses, in the rider clauses. So reach out to your cyber insurance company. Another, depending on what your indicators are, right? If obviously if you have a network that's down with a splash screen telling you a number to call, you're pretty sure that you're compromised, right? But one good thing to do is also just to level set and make sure that there isn't something else going on operationally, that there isn't some red herring that is being flagged as a compromise just because it's you're seeing it in the news. And then after that, counsel, immediate legal. If your insurance company, or if you don't have an insurance policy or an insurance company to work with, call a lawyer. That should be your first call if you don't have a cyber insurance policy. If you do have a cyber insurance policy, they'll put you in touch with counsel. And from there, and I advise this all the time, every interaction that you have with either the attackers or outside forensic organizations to help recover or determine the depth of the breach should be done through legal counsel. Therefore, that way you're as an organization, you're protected with attorney-client privilege. There's a lot of sensitive information that gets revealed and discussed and documented during these breach events, and making sure that you have that protected by your attorney-client privilege is something that is invaluable in the long-term health of your organization.
So, Michael, what are your thoughts on it?
I just wanted, so one of the things that Scott brought up that I think is often overlooked is it's a super emotional experience to realize that you are owned and that you are no longer in control. And I think that that's where the value of tabletops come into play, and doing these dry runs. If you were in the military, you're going to have a lot of drills that you can repeat and get a lot of reps in, so that when the emotions are there, you are running on muscle memory. And the only way to do that for these types of things is to run through dry runs, which equate to tabletop exercises, where you're putting these things to plan, or you're putting the plans together. Without running through them, you're more likely to stumble through them, try to find the documents. Every rep that the organization, because it's not just one person that is going to go through these tabletops, it's the organization as a whole. Every time you go through them, you will get better. And what's interesting is a lot of the regulations dictate and require pen testing quarterly or annually, but the procedures, like what that covers your technical controls of what, whether an attacker can get in, but what's not often mandated are the testing of these procedures, the tabletop exercises, and that's what you're actually going to do when an attacker is hitting you. So I think we need to think about where the incentives are. A lot of people are incentivized to get pen tests, but they're not incentivized to test their plans, and that's kind of a curious position we find ourselves in as an industry.
So I kind of equate that to the new parent test driving the route to the hospital while the pregnancy is still
Yeah.
happening. So
Well, it's the reason why you remember the birth of your second child a lot more than you remember the birth of your first, right?
because you've been through it. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I totally get that. I mean, for me, my first was a blur. The second one, it's like I remember more of it. So yeah, that's kind of how I equated that. So, I think all of you have touched on cyber insurance. Is this it doesn't seem like it's kind of like car insurance where you have to have car insurance right now to drive. I mean, is that something that you all would recommend at this stage, that every customer research and purchase some sort of cyber insurance plan?
So yes. However, we're in a very interesting time right now with cyber insurance. The industry is really starting to understand the historical data so that they can better design their policies and programs to support the current landscape. They've, as an industry, have lost a lot of money on insurance policies with the advent of ransomware. So there is currently a trend of getting less coverage for more premium right now. So it can be a challenging time right now. But the better positioned you are with an information security program, holistically part of the organization's risk management process, and the ability to display that to the underwriters, the better off you will be when trying to obtain a cyber security insurance policy.
Yeah. I mean, so, well, cyber insurance, I think of like the Colonial Penn commercials with, Alex Trebek back in the day, like, oh, I can't afford, oh, for only 20. I mean, that's how they were selling it back in I can't afford EDR. I can't afford cyber tools. I can't afford a SIM. I can't afford, an enhanced security program, but you can afford $25 a day for an insurance policy that will, pay the attackers and, pay all your expenses when the inevitable happens because you haven't locked your doors and you haven't made it just a little bit more difficult for someone to come in. So, because of that, the insurance business was happy to sell policies all day because, like he said, the numbers weren't there. But all of a sudden, last year, whatever surplus the underwriters collected over the first 5 years of selling those policies is gone. And I guarantee, when we hear stories about recovering the crypto payments offshore and things like that, the insurance companies that were involved in those payments have their own agents right there on the ground, working right next to our federal agents, trying to get that money back. So on that note, like, yes, I think even in this precarious situation we are in insurance, every organization should carry a cyber policy for the main purpose of you need an advocate in the risk world for your organization. What we saw happen with SolarWinds in December created a huge liability for every organization that used SolarWinds Orion. They all had risk associated with the fact that they used this tool that they weren't in control of, they couldn't protect against. If an organization was breached as a result of that, their insurance carrier now has a beef with SolarWinds insurance carrier, and that's where you want that realm to live, right? As a single organization going after a big, a huge company like a software organization or something like that that's been compromised, that resulted in business loss for you, you're not going to get noticed. But you want to be part of a bigger risk pool, which you accomplish by having a policy.
Right. I just wanted to expand on one of the things that's changing with the insurance. So they're dropping people when they don't meet their requirements. So, up until very recently, the first questions that we would have to ask somebody is, what are your regulatory requirements? What type of information do you use? Where are you positioned as an organization? That will dictate a lot of the security requirements for an organization. What I think will change and is already changing is the insurance companies are going to dictate what you have to have. We already see that being pushed with multi-factor authentication, but I think that's going to expand into more policy and procedure areas because it lowers the amount of risk they have to eat. So the more assurance that they can have that you are up to snuff, the better you will be positioned with your policy. And I would not be surprised to see over the coming years tiered policies based on how many checks you can prove that you have, how many control areas you cover, how many of your policies you have in place, how often they're tested, and documentation associated with that. That you're now not just going to have to supply to your regulators, but you're going to have to supply to your insurance policies or insurance carriers.
So, I'm going to make a statement, just my observation that's been somewhat reinforced by this conversation, and wanted to kind of grab final thoughts from each one of you. I feel like, even 5 to 10 years ago, cybersecurity was primarily focused on the tools that you have to secure your stuff. But I feel like the cybersecurity conversation, the cybersecurity planning has basically expanded into a lot of other areas that people didn't really consider it to be a part of. So you obviously have your security side, but sounds like your backup, disaster recovery, business continuity plans all involve like what your risk tolerance is. The insurance company, you now have to consider different insurance companies, engage various companies that specialize in cybersecurity. So it feels like this landscape, especially given the sophistication of the threats that have hit the market over time, have required a change in industries that really never looked at cybersecurity as something to be a contender for change. So, Scott, given you kind of run the cybersecurity practice, give me your final thoughts. I mean, am I off base? Is that kind of accurate?
No, I mean, I think you're dead on, right? I mean, the landscape's changing and evolving. As an industry, we had a tough year. It's we really cross discipline relationships with cyber and the other disciplines in IT, I think, is what really needs to be driven in 21. We're talking, everything we talked about today with ransomware requires coordination between infrastructure, the business, network, all the different disciplines in IT. But and because of that, too, all the tool sets, right? The software and hardware tools that we use. It is an ever-changing landscape that is every day there's something new to look at and be aware of. So as many eyes as you can have on the prize and kind of, aware, right, of the threats and what the tools are to recover from them, the better.
What about you, Keith?
For me, it's really, information security, cybersecurity is not an IT problem. It's a business problem. So, business operations directly conflicts with a secure system. So it's a collaboration between what the business wants to accomplish and how we secure and protect those systems. So really it's injecting cybersecurity into normal business flow and process so that, it can be born together and coexist to the success of the organization as a whole.
That's actually a really good point. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's not just the security landscape that's changing, but it's the kind of cultural adoption of all things technology that's changing, and that's evolving the risks. So, 15 years ago there weren't degrees in cybersecurity. Now there are. It's an industry. It used to be an extra task of the sysadmins or the network group. Because there was only parts of businesses that relied on this much technology. Now everything is offloaded to systems. So I think as our businesses change, we have to understand that our risks change. And every time that you adopt a new service or augment part of your operations with a piece of technology, you have to understand that now my risk has changed. And that all will point back to the security around those services or your dependence thereupon.
I really appreciate the time from you guys today. I know that I've learned a lot. Hopefully, some of the viewers out there have definitely learned a lot. But unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this episode. For those of you out there, thank you for stopping by. Make sure to take a look at all of our previous episodes as well as the Arraya Insights Expert Q&A series. See you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck.